Before the start of this video, if you are looking for any of these singles that I talk about today, make sure to check out my TCG Player affiliate link down below in the description. And by clicking on that link, and when you shop for those singles, I do get a small bonus. Another way you can support the channel is by becoming a patron member. There are some great benefits, as you can have your name on each video, you do have early access to videos, giveaways, deck advice and upgrades, and much more when you do join. And if anything else, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. That definitely goes a long way in supporting the channel. Hey, how's it going YouTube? This is Devin coming back at you with another video today on PubStomp MTG, and in this video today I'm going to focus on another god that is coming out in Aether Drift. This one is also from Amonkhet. I made a deck tech video on the other god. It was Orzhov color combination. I'm trying to remember the name as I'm recording this, but I can't seem to remember it. But I did make a video for that one. If you do want to go check it out, I'll post the link above here. Besides that point, there are two other gods. Hazoret is one of them, and it's not that interesting if I'm going to be honest. It's in mono red colors, and it just makes a creature with power 2 or less unblockable, which is not very interesting as a commander build around. But on the flip side, we did get introduced to a Simic Frog, and its name is Sunen, Luxa Embodied, and I think this one is an incredible build around. It is obviously focusing on Simic good stuff, focusing on a counter theme and drawing cards. It all focuses on odd and even converted mana costs, and we've seen that theme before with, I'm trying to remember that one girl's name, focuses on odd and even converted mana cost cards. This focuses on the same thing in a little bit of a different twist, and I wanted to jump right into it. So first of all, Sunen has incredible abilities for 3 blue and a green, so 5 mana total for a 6/6 body. It has reach, trample, and indestructible, and it can attack or block unless it has an even number of counters on it, so very similar to the other Amonkhet gods that has a stipulation in order for it to attack or even block. However, it does have an additional ability which I think is really good in this deck. At the beginning of your first main phase, put a +1/+1 counter on Sunen, and if it has an odd number of counters on it, draw 2 cards. So as a value engine, I think this is quite powerful. Either you're drawing 2 cards, or you're attacking with Sunen, or blocking with it. And because it has a 6/6 body with indestructible, most likely it's not going to get killed in combat either. Even if it couldn't attack or block forever, I think it still would be quite powerful just for that static ability of drawing 2 cards. But of course, since you're putting 1/1 counters on each time, there could be some situations where you don't draw cards but you can attack. But there are also some other ways we could kind of get around that, and I'll discuss that in this next section. We could always make sure we have an odd number of counters on it, so that way we could draw 2 cards on our first main phase, and then later on we could put an additional counter on Sunen. One way we could do that is by using Innkeeper's Talent, because at the beginning of combat on your turn you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. This works hand in hand with Sunen. After our first main phase of drawing 2 cards, we could go into combat, put another counter on Sunen, so that way we could just go ahead and swing in. And this ability can be repeatable every single turn, because at our first main phase on the next turn, we're gonna have 3 1/1 counters on it, and then we get to draw 2 cards because it's an odd number, and then go into combat with Innkeeper's Talent to go back to even to swing in again. Plus, Innkeeper's Talent does have additional benefits by leveling up, by giving our permanents ward as long as they have counters on them. And with level 3, it might be tricky using that last one, because we put 2 counters on a creature instead of just 1 at the beginning of combat on your turn, so just a fair warning. In a similar fashion, Hadina's Climb is another great option, because very similar to Innkeeper's Talent, we get to put a 1/1 counter on a creature at the beginning of combat on our turn, and we can transform it into the Winged Temple of Araska, where it can be a land, or we could give a creature flying and +X/+X until on a turn where X is its power by paying into that mana cost, which can be a win con depending on how huge Sunen is, or another creature we control. Another card would be Zimone Paradox Sculptor. Again, we're going to repeat this over again, where we could put a +1/+1 counter on each up to 2 target creatures we control, and we could double the number of each kind of counters on up to 2 target creatures or artifacts we control with that activated ability. This is just another great option. Another one that does come to mind is Bristly Bill Spinesower. It does focus on landfall, but it can double the number of 1/1 counters on each creature we control, which can be a game ender in all honesty. Even though this is not a landfall theme, I still think Bristly Bill is an excellent choice, because we're playing lands anyways, we might as well get 1/1 counters on our creature, especially Sunen, to get card draw and attack. There are plenty of other ways we could get counters on our creatures. Those are just some that I wanted to focus on, because little by little we want to make sure we get counters on Sunen to draw cards and attack with her. But now I wanted to focus on some counter synergies. So there are a lot of ways we could benefit on counters. Polywog Prodigy is the first one that comes to mind. It does have the evolve ability, and whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell with mana value less than Polywog Prodigy's power, draw a card. This is just a way we could get extra card draw just in case if we don't have odd counters on Sunen. Plus on top of that, it is a frog after all. Our commander is a frog god, so might as well include some good frogs in the deck. If we do want to protect our creatures, Inspiring Call and Silkguard can be great options. Inspiring Call, you draw a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Those creatures gain indestructible until on a turn. Our commander already will have indestructible, but our other creatures might not. This is a good way we can ensure them having a little bit more protection, especially against the board wipe. The same can be applied for Silkguard. You can pay X into that mana ability and put 1/1 counters on each up to X target creatures you control, and our creatures can gain hexproof until on a turn as long as they're modified, which can be quite useful, especially against targeted removal. Speaking of removal, look no further than Wave Goodbye. Return each creature without a +1/+1 counter on it to its owner's hand. So this is basically a nice Cyclonic Rift for us. Most likely we're going to have creatures on board with 1/1 counters on them that we're not going to bounce to our hand, but most likely our opponents are going to bounce creatures to their hand. And most likely you will have a lot of creatures that do have 1/1 counters on them. Why not use Kodama the West Tree? This will ensure that we could ramp a little bit further whenever a modified creature you control deals combat damage to a player. Search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. This is just again a great way that we could get a lot of lands. Because we're in 7-color combination, we're in low colors, or we could add a lot of basic lands to get a lot of them out with Kodama. But sometimes you want to get in for a lot of combat damage, but your opponents have a lot of blockers. Why not give your creatures with counters unblockable with Herald of Seek Extremes? Essentially, creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them can't be blocked. Simple but effective. This is a way essentially to close out the game, and there are plenty of other ways to close out the game that I'll talk about next. So first of all, I want to mention one powerful card that a lot of people should put in their counter decks, and that's Colonian Hydra. This is a perfect way to close out the game. It does enter the battlefield with 4 1/1 counters on it, but most importantly, when it does attack, double the number of 1/1 counters on each creature you control. Especially if we do have a lot of creatures on the battlefield that do have 1/1 counters on them, we can increase them by doubling them and swing for a huge amount of damage. But if that wasn't enough, you can increase their power when they deal combat damage with Quilled Greatworm. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage this turn, put that many 1/1 counters on it. So this one doesn't necessarily specify if they already have counters on them. It just is based off of their power. Let's just say Quilled Greatworm itself attacks and deals combat damage. You can put 7 1/1 counters on it, and that is also applied for every creature that you deal combat damage with. They put that many 1/1 counters on it equal to the number of damage they dealt. So if Sunen has even counters on it, let's just say it's an 8/8, you swing in, you put 8 more 1/1 counters on it, which is quite insane, making it like a 16/16 in that specific example. Another card that usually helps me win the game is Railway Brawler. This is excellent because whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you put X 1/1 counters on it where X is its power. This is immediately. So if you have this on the battlefield, then you cast your commander. Your commander will immediately enter the battlefield with 6 1/1 counters on it, making it a 12/12. Plus you can plot this for a big explosive turn. You can cast this for free and also cast another creature. I've seen this put so much work in my Helga Skittish Seer deck. It's quite insane. One of my favorite cards to put in that deck, and I think it's a great shoe-in in this deck too. The same can be applied for Surak and Goreclaw. I love this so much because it gives your creatures trample, but not only that, it gives them haste and a 1/1 counter when they enter the battlefield. It is very rare to see a card that gives haste in green or blue, and since this is a little bit more of an aggressive strategy, I thought it would be a nice shoe-in. And most likely, your commander is going to be absolutely huge, and I mean seriously, it's probably going to be yoked out of its mind. So you may want a card like Pathbreaker Ibex, where when it does attack, creatures you control gain trample and +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Because we're continuously putting counters on our commander, most likely it's going to be absolutely huge, and we can make the overrun ability even more insane on each creature we control. But if you're not winning by an overrun ability, there are plenty of other options where you just basically win the game by doing something. For example, 20-Toad Toad. This is perfect because again, it's a frog. It fits perfectly with our commander being a frog god, even though it's not the type of frog god, but look at it. Your maximum hand size is 20. Whenever you attack with 2 or more creatures, put a +1/+1 counter on 20-Toad Toad and draw a card. And whenever 20-Toad Toad attacks, you win the game if there are 20 or more counters on it, or if you have 20 or more cards in your hand. So you could either try to draw a sheer amount of cards to win that way, or put a lot of counters on 20-Toad Toad to win the game. So this is just a fun way. I think it's a little bit more rewarding compared to other cards like Thassa's Oracle to say I just win the game. The same can be applied for Simic Ascendancy. This is another fantastic card. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Simic Ascendancy has 20 or more growth counters on it, you win the game, and you gain those growth counters counters by whenever one or more 1/1 counters are put on a creature you control, you put that many growth counters on Simic Ascendancy. And luckily it does have that activated ability of putting a 1/1 counter on a creature you control, so there's ways that we could pour more counters on creatures to put more growth counters on Simic Ascendancy and eventually winning the game if your opponent hasn't removed it already. However, that is going to do for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video on Sunen, Luxa, Embodied. I think this is one incredible commander. If anything else, it's just a great value engine. Most likely, you're going to want to draw the cards instead of it not worrying about attacking or blocking, because obviously that's more of an advantage. But there can be some scenarios where this could be an absolute nightmare for your opponents to deal with because it does have trample, and if you're putting a lot of 1/1 counters on it, most likely you could even win by dealing combat damage to somebody through commander damage. But I would love to hear your thoughts. What are your thoughts about Sunen, and what other cards would you recommend in this list? I would love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. Also, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stopping by.